Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today we're going to discuss Ice Barrage. Recently we held our second vote on what skill we would discuss next after we did Fireball, and Ice Barrage is the clear winner by a full 10% over the next leading candidate, and we have broken the 400 vote barrier, so we're going to get underway with it. So let's start with some pros to Ice Barrage. Ice Barrage is, in my opinion, one of the better skills in the game. It's just underutilized and it has a couple of faults to it, more of quality of life things almost, that keep it from being used more. I like the skill, it looks good, it feels good when you use it, but unfortunately it lacks a couple of things, and those will fall in the con section and we'll discuss that. But let's start with the pros first. First pro is that the skill tree itself has a lot of nodes. I love that when a skill tree has lots and lots of options, and the way it's laid out, you have easy and quick access to almost all of them within just 3 nodes. So you can access almost all parts of the tree within just 3 nodes out, which is awesome. So not only is it huge, but it's easily accessible. That's awesome. Another pro to the skill, it has many, many different ways to build it. You can build it with single projectile, you can build it with huge projectile that fires fast and does lots of damage. You can fire it with multiple projectiles and it fires slower. You can do it defensively and get an ice shield that blocks incoming projectiles or reduces cold damage that you take. You can build into dot damage and get a bunch of frostbite going and build that way. And you can build into CC and get freeze and freeze multi and freeze monsters. So it has a lot of different ways to build it, and that really adds to its identity as a skill. It's definitely one of my favorites for being able to play around with. Unfortunately, like I said, there's just a couple of pros that keep it from being more used, in my opinion. Number one being it has a very high mana cost, and once you cast it, it only fires in one direction. Now, while that's part of the identity of the skill, I assume that it's purposely designed that way. This skill would be so much more useful if once you fired it, it either followed your mouse cursor or it had an option to follow your mouse cursor, or even a more quality of life thing, when it fired, it automatically targeted the nearest enemy. So if you targeted one direction and it started firing that way, and then it killed an enemy, or another enemy ran closer to you from a different direction, it would auto target itself and turn itself to that direction and fire. This would make it way more easier to use. Right now it feels like you use this massive amount of mana to get a skill started, and then by the time it gets its firing rate up, or it gets its damage up, everything's ramped up with it, there's no mobs over there anymore, or you've ran completely past that, or you're fighting mobs in a different direction and you're trying to run past the mobs to try and hit them on the backside. It just feels clunky in a sense where if it had a couple of options to aim at mobs or to home in on mobs differently, I think it would be a way more well used skill. Its damage is good. The way you can build it, its build identity is good, its build variety is good. So I think those are just the two things that it really needs. The mana cost is even okay if it would actually, target, more mobs and be more useful for a longer period of time. Now, it does fine against bosses, but who's going to use a skill only against bosses? You can do it, but if it's going to be your secondary DPS skill, you're going to go with something else for utility and just use something else like Elemental Nova or Lightning Blast or Glacier, something that's going to do more damage than it already. Alright, so just like I did with the other video, I'm going to throw together about 5 different builds, different ways to build it, and we're going to go over it, discuss each one of them, what's good about it, what's bad about it, and just kind of discuss how it could be better, I guess, in a way. So for starters, we're going to go with the CC freeze in the first build. So obviously your DPS is going to be a little bit lower. Remember, my character is completely naked. We're not wearing anything, no idols. We did have to put some passives in just to unlock the Ice Barrage, but I made sure not to take any that were any sort of damage increase or anything that could kind of falter our results here. So we have our Ice Barrage, which is going to cost us 50 mana cost, which is pretty expensive, and the CC is for freeze. Now, if you think about this, what else could you use to just replace this and have freeze on an enemy? And if your first thought is snap freeze, correct, and it would cost you way less mana, and it's guaranteed freeze. So building Ice Barrage as a freeze type, while it works, it's just not the most optimal thing in the game, and it's going to feel clunky. But for this, I went ahead and put 4 points into Hailstorm, so it has an increased fire rate. We got 3 points in Intensifying Cold. This gives it an increase of 30% freeze rate multiplier every time that it's fired an ice shard. You can get up to 10 stacks, so this will give it up to another 300% freeze rate multiplier. We have 1 point in Frigid Doom. This will give it a 10% chance on each hit that it does to cast a Frost Nova. We got 5 points in Frigid Barrage, so it has another 200% freeze rate multiplier. Now that means that after 10 of them have gone off, you'll be at 500% increased freeze rate multiplier. Now, as you all know, that means that you'll be freezing trash mobs, but against bosses, you're still going to struggle to get a freeze in there. We got 1 point in Ice Burst, so that when you activate it, 5 ice shards will take off. Then we got 3 points in Arctic Storm. The Ice Burst will do 120% more damage, and it also has 120% increased freeze rate multiplier. And the last 3 points are in Eternal Winter to increase the duration, which allows more ice shots to be fired, which is going to allow you to take advantage of that maximum 10 stacks of the freeze rate. So there's a higher chance by the end of it in the last few hits that it does that you'll be able to do more of a freeze. And then what this is going to look like, we're going to go ahead and fire it here at the training dummy. You have that 5 that takes off, and then you just absolutely have hit after hit after hit after hit, and it's just going to absolutely annihilate your target. Now, against single targets, like I said, it's awesome. You'll probably get a freeze in there from it. But once you fire it, if your enemies are over here and you need to go fight, well, now you're trying to run to where your enemies are getting hit by it, and it's just kind of a lot more clunky. Now, while an awesome skill, what would be cool is say that I target this training dummy, as I run away, since that's the only target, if I ran over here, if these automatically churned and kept firing at that, or if a new enemy came in that was closer and it churned and started firing at that enemy, the quality of life for this skill would go up massively, and people would want to use it because it would auto be targeting things around you, and it would feel really good. And since it doesn't have a huge amount of AoE anyways, to be compared to Lightning Blast with Forking or Elemental Nova in its big circle, you'd actually be able to get much more use out of it instead of you trying to run to try and make it hit because it's already firing in one direction. But that's how I would play it if I were to do the CC version. This I would just use against bosses and high health things that are going to stay in one spot and be able to take all those hits and then hopefully get a freeze or two in. For build number 2, we're going to build into a dot build. We're going to build completely around Frostbite, attacking as fast as possible to apply as many stacks of Frostbite as you can on the enemy. So with this build, I've got 2 points in the Biting Cold. It's going to increase your crit chance, increase your damage multiplicatively. 5 points in Nailed Shot's going to allow you to pierce, so we'll actually be able to pierce in this one. It'll go through enemies, so you can clear out trash mobs. Now that's only if the mobs are lined up, not if they're side by side, as it doesn't pierce and bounce. It'll just continue on the same direction. And then 4 points in Hypothermia. So for every time that it pierces on an enemy, it applies 2 stacks of Frostbite. Then we have Eternal Winter, which is going to increase the duration of the skill by 3 seconds. So as it picks up its fire rate throughout the use of the skill, it'll pick up really quickly at the end. And with that increased duration, you'll be able to do even more stacks of Frostbite. 1 point in Looming Frost will increase the damage you do by 5% for every shard that's been fired. You can have up to a maximum of 5 stacks or 25% more damage. And then Hailstorm to increase the fire rate by 25%. And then Frostbite with the alt. It doesn't give a tooltip DPS, so I don't know exactly what kind of damage Frostbite's going to do, but the overall DPS of the skill, still a 50 mana cost, still a 3-second cooldown, but our DPS went up a little bit to 187 damage per second, and I'm pretty sure that's calculating in Frostbite somehow into the mix of damage. And then when we hit the target dummy with this, you'll be able to see that you'll be applying massive amounts of Frostbite, and that damage over time is going to stack. So when this gets all done, we'll see how much Frostbite we actually have on this. And we're doing about 400 damage, which is a huge amount of Frostbite damage. I mean, that's got to be 30 to 40 stacks at least that's on that trading dummy. So if you can get your enemy to stick in one spot, it does make a really good dot, especially if you're doing Frostbite with something else or some other sort of dot build with it. If you were running Fire or a Cold or something else, the problem with it, again, is the targeting, because the moment that I target this and then I run away, granted it doesn't count as an enemy, these would normally home a little bit towards it, but like I said, as we run over here, you're just not going to be hitting all of the enemies. It's just going to continue off in that one direction. So it's just really hard to target things with it, especially if you're trying to apply dots, which require you to get a whole lot of hits on the same enemy to stack it up and get the kill. For the third build, we're going to build into the Ice Shield, which honestly is a lot of fun to play around with, especially when you use it and you're actually purposely having projectiles hit it to block them so that you don't take damage. Unfortunately, like AoE hits and stuff will still like do damage to you, but it is a lot of fun to play with. You will take a little less cold damage, but overall, it's just really not going to be something that you're going to really want to build into. Flame Ward is much more powerful defensively, and Ice Barrage, it can't have 100% uptime this way. If you do like offset it with Flame Ward, you can. You can have two utilities going and it can work quite well. You can have Flame Ward active to give you ward when you take a big hit. You can use Ice Barrage when you know there's a lot of projectiles. You see Axemen in the arena come up, you can throw down that shield and then kind of sideswipe. Unfortunately, the part that sucks is that you can't really choose the shield. It would be much cooler if the shield like surrounded you, or if there was a way to have it, churn like a certain way so that, or maybe even if it auto saw incoming missiles and churned to block projectiles from multiple different ways, because it can be really hard if enemies are surrounding you. You can only block on one side. So for the nodes, our DPS on this is a bit higher, but that's mostly because one of the nodes reduces the duration but gives you more damage modifier with it. So you're going to do more damage per second, but less damage overall. We got 4 points in Hailstorm to increase the fire rate, 3 points in Warding Bolts so that there's a 45% chance every hit that is done that you'll gain 7 ward. Then we have Aura of Frost. This will have a chill duration on enemies around you for 2 seconds. Every second you'll apply chill to nearby enemies while you have the Ice Barrage active. Then we have 4 points in Cryogenesis, and this is what gives you the more damage. 80% more damage, 40% less duration. 1 point in Ice Shield, so that upon activation of Ice Barrage you gain a shield. This increases the cooldown by 4 seconds. The Ice Shield itself only lasts for 2 seconds. 1 point in Shattering a Bulwark means the Ice Shield will explode when it expires. 1 point in Deep Shield increases that 2-second duration to a 4-second duration, but it also increases the cooldown of the skill itself by another 2 seconds. And then 2 points in Frost Armor so that you have 60% more global cold damage, which is multiplicative, and then you take 20% less cold damage. And then to show you how this plays out, so when I fire it, we have the shield appear, and we can just run around, and it would block any projectiles that are coming from this direction. Now, like I said, if you know that your axemen are like up here, say, you could fire it that way, and you have a shield, and you can just sit here and block the projectiles, which is really cool. And it's a lot of fun to do just to play around with, but overall, you're going to be attacked from other directions, and again, there's no way to turn the shield around. And once we fire this, you can see with our cooldown here, we have a 9-second cooldown. This only lasts for 4 seconds. It's gone. We still got 5 more seconds of cooldown on it, so it's not a 100% uptime thing. And then for damage, you can see that you are hitting a little bit harder than we were with the other skills. But again, it's just going to be a defensive kind of way to play with it. It does do some damage on top of blocks and projectiles. It is fun to play around with, but I wish they could do something to make that shield like, circle around you. You could build into having multiple ones so you could get up to 4 of them so it blocks it from all directions. Do something with it that makes it a little bit more useful, or make it to where it follows wherever your mouse pointer is. So if we're running and I fire this, I could point it here and now the shield moves wherever I move my mouse so that I can spin it around myself and, block projectiles from different directions. Something interactive like that would make it a lot more useful and would be even more fun to play with. And then this is my favorite setup for it. This is going to be the multi-projectile version of it. So what you're going to do is you're going to have 5 projectiles that kind of cone out and can pierce at 100% rate and just clear everything in front of you. But again, the only reason I don't like to use it is because it just goes in one direction. And if you fire it ahead of you in a map, it's awesome, unless the map, has a lot of turns and then you're constantly having to redo it. But for straight lines, it's amazing. We got 2 points in Biting Cold to unlock the 3 points in Sublimation, and this is going to increase its damage by 90%, increase the Ice Shard damage, but it reduces the fire rate by 39%. That's why the DPS is pretty low. Each one is going to hit much harder, but we're not firing as fast, so the DPS per second is much slower. This also adds a 30-second delay. This also adds a 30% delay in between each ice shard that is fired. Then we got 1 point in Wintry Blast. This adds 4 projectiles, so you will fire 5 of them, but the fire rate is again dropped by another 40%, and then it increases the mana cost by 20%, so it's more expensive. 5 points in Nailed Shot will make it have a 100% Pierce chance. Then we went with 3 points in Eternal Winter to increase the duration, 1 point in Looming Frost so you can have 5 stacks of increased damage, and 5 points in Hailstorm to kind of get 25% of our fire rate back because it's been slowed down a lot by the other notes. And then for how this one works, like I said, it's going to fire in a cone shape and it just looks really cool. You just fire them off, they pierce, and they're just going to wipe everything in front of you. Like if I fire from over here and fire them that way, everything that's in front of you on this map, and these pierce through, so they're going to go really far, they're going to hit every enemy, and they'll just clear everything in front of you. They just don't really do a whole lot of damage. They do enough to, kill trash mobs and things, and for a 61 mana cost, it's alright. But again, the fact that if you're playing a map that's not straight lines and you got to do a lot of curving around and you can't change it, you just end up spending a lot of mana with it. You can make a viable build out of it. It is fun to play with, but other skills are just better. And then for build number 5, the final way that I'm going to build it, this is going to be for the DPS version. This is your single target, basically boss killer. There's going to be some nodes in here that aren't reflected in the DPS, but it makes it go absolutely nuts on bosses, and it does really, really good damage. So we got 4 points in Biting Cold for that 32% multiplicative damage, along with some more crit chance. 3 points in Sublimation, which gives it 90% more damage, increases the ice shard size, reduces your fire rate by almost 40%, and then puts a 30% delay in between the ice shards. 3 points in Eternal Winter, increases the duration by 3 seconds. You also put 1 point in Challenge of the Elements. This is not reflected on the DPS chart. However, this will increase your fire rate against rare enemies and bosses by 20% up to a maximum of 100%. So you'll get double the DPS. You'll be firing 100% faster against a boss, which makes it do a lot of damage, and it's actually a really good single target build for it. It's just I don't like to play it. I might do a build on it in the future though. 2 points in Looming Frost gives you up to 10 stacks of more damage per ice shard that's been fired, so you can get up to 50% more damage this way. Then we got 2 points in Hailstorm for the fire rate, 4 points in Cryogenesis for 80% more damage. This reduces the duration by 40%. And then we went with Ice Spire. This increases the fire rate by 30%, which helps offset that 30% delay that you had. This does reduce your move speed by 30%. So this is why I only like to use it on boss fights, because you're kind of, already stuck in one area, always fighting in that same spot. Although reducing your move speed, you got to be careful. Move speed will reduce your survivability. And for the tooltip, this only costs 50 mana, but you can see the DPS is over twice that of our next leading build that we had, 501 damage per second. And remember, you'll have 100% more attack or fire rate against bosses and rares, so it's even higher than that. That's pretty incredible for a completely nude character. You can actually get that DPS to about 50,000 if you have all the right gear on and whatnot, and that's a lot of damage per second for a skill that you just hit once, and then you can't really run away because you have to make sure you're still targeting in that area. But it's a pretty viable skill, and like I said, I might do a build on it in the future. I just hate that it's a single shard, and I'll show you in the gameplay here. It's hard to hit the target, and again you have to stay in that one line of direction, which just makes it hard to use. So for how to play this one, when you fire it, and look, just like that, you already missed. Now, granted, if this was actually an enemy, these would home in and actually hit it, but it's just amazing how small of a window they have. And then and I missed again. That's embarrassing. But now that we go for the hits here, you can see it's actually hitting pretty hard, hitting over twice as hard as the other ones. Where you're getting a lot of hits in, and then of course, if this was a boss or a rare, that firing rate would pick up, and it would actually get 100% faster because you're getting way more than 5 hits, which give you that 100% firing rate speed. All right, that's going to be it for this skill discussion. Hopefully, it gave you some ideas of how to use Ice Barrage. Maybe you saw me try one of the ways and you've wanted to try that. Maybe you want to run around with the Ice Shield and try and block projectiles and see how it goes. Maybe you want to build it into a single target Absolute Destroyer with dots. They're all pretty viable. They're just, like I said, clunky. Hopefully they do something with the targeting of it in the future, so where you can aim it with the mouse or do something with it that would still keep it thematically different than all the other classes. You look at like Ice Thorns, which is kind of like it. Ice Thorns, while it does home and shoot out in multiple directions, it doesn't follow your mouse. So if Ice Thorns was able to follow your mouse, or there was a node in there to where it could follow your cursor, it would be pretty epic, and it would change the way that it feels, and it might feel a lot better. But like I said, that's going to be it for this. If you guys like this style of video, or if there's something you want me to add or take away, please let me know in the comments below. These are still relatively new. I'm not sure exactly what it is you guys want to see with them as we just talk about it, but that's going to be it. But now that this video is out, look for that community post on the YouTube channel. We will be voting for a third skill to talk about here shortly. And if your skill isn't on that list or there's one you've been wanting to talk about, make sure you comment it below and I'll put it into the next poll. And as always, stay safe, travelers.